Welcome, everyone, to Fantasy Foresight, the podcast. We're your hosts and co-founders of fantasyforesite.com, coming to you from the Rambo Fixture Company studios. I'm Ben.
And I'm Jay.
You ready to get rolling, Jay?
You know it. Let's do this.
All right, let's go. Welcome in, everyone. It is Wednesday, July 15th, and it is a new and improved preview season. We have got the running backs and the quarterbacks of the AFC East for you tonight. We've got our guy Steve back with us for this one, and once again, Fantasy Foresight, the podcast, is live. How you doing tonight, Jay?
Ben, it's preview season, baby. It's finally here. RBJ's a little worn out from doing some RVing the last few days, but I am back and ready to go, my friend. It's preview season. Woo! Steve, how are you doing tonight, my friend? You got to be doing well.
Sensational. And man, RBJ, I just look at you and I just see Gardner Minshew, and that's just how it's going to be from now on. But yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun, guys. I mean, heck, I'm fired up just talking before we even got started on the podcast tonight. So this is going to be a good one. It's preview season, guys. This stuff's awesome.
Let's go.
We finally made it. RVJ is a nickname that is here to stay. Self-imposed. We finally made it based on a video challenge he threw out in Scott Fishbowl 10, and the rest of the league mates in his division took care of the rest. So we appreciate that here at Fantasy Foresight, all that free content for good old Foresight Jay. So this is how the episode's going to work tonight. We're going to start with the running backs in order of ADP according to fantasyfootballcalculator.com, according to 12-team full PPR redraft as of July 13th, just a couple of days ago. So we will go in order of their ADP. We'll go through all the fantasy relevant running backs in the AFC East, and then we will do the same thing with the quarterbacks of the AFC East. And with the addition of Cam Newton, that's all of a sudden a pretty exciting bunch over there. And so we will take a look at their projections, the all-important Total Foresight rank, their points per game fantasy finishes over the last 3 years. We'll take a look at their season overview from 2019. We'll look at their notable 2019 stat ranks, and we'll check out some next-gen stats, any relevant information from their player profile, online profile. We'll take a look at the O-line ranks and the strength of schedule by position. That, and also this year, I've got to take a little bit of credit for the concept, but Steve definitely takes credit for all the work. He has got a whole new blog series that's going to accompany the preview season on this podcast, where he is looking at trends and tendencies of coaching staffs and offensive units overall to tie it into the individual 360 perspective that we look at player by player. So when you put that all together, we have got one heck of an episode for everybody tonight, and it's just going to get better as the preview season rolls on. And first up, we've got New York Jets running back Le'Veon Bell. Jay, take it away.
All right. Like you said, we want an all-encompassing look to get our total foresight. And as you said, first up we have Lev Bell from the New York Jets, coming off a 7-9 season, currently in drafts. Le'Veon Bell is going as RB18 in the middle of the third round, behind Leonard Fournette and James Conner, right in front of David Johnson and Melvin Gordon. Interesting spot there. His 2020 projection right now currently has him projected as RB15. His total foresight rank currently has him as RB19. So based on that information, would you draft him or pass on him? Ben, quick, draft or pass?
I think I got to pass, and you're about to cover some metrics to tell everybody why.
Absolutely. I am. All right. His fantasy points per game finishes over the last 3 seasons. He has finished RB18, nothing, and then RB2. So quite a range of finishes over the last 3 seasons for Lev Bell. He probably burned you on that whole holdout season, but let's focus on last season. In 2019, the most recent time we saw Lev Bell in action, he missed 1 game. Not bad. He did have 229 attempts for 748 yards on the ground. Not great. He averaged 3.3 yards per carry for 3 touchdowns. Again, not great and not what we're accustomed to seeing from a guy who finished RB2 overall a mere 3 seasons ago. So he did add 21 catches on 73 targets for 425 yards. A nice little add-on there. He did get in the end zone once through the air. Again, not great volume, not great on the scoring side, which led to his RB18 overall finish in 2019. Now, let's take a look at some notable 2020 stat ranks for Lev Bell. He was 10th in RB1 percentage. He was 15th in RB2 percentage. Okay, so not terrible. He was 13th in consistency. He was 10th in consistency weeks 10 through 16. So, like seeing that improvement down the stretch, a top 10 back in consistency at the most critical time of the season. Now, he was 19th in foresight consistency. He was 7th in both targets and receptions, and 9th in receiving yards. So again, not bad, but not what we're used to seeing from Lev Bell. He really didn't have any notable next-gen stats to mention. He was 4th in overall snap share in 2019, yet he was only 27th in goal line touches. Ouch. Pro Football Focus, his 2020 O-line rank has their O-line as 27th out of 32. Again, not great. His strength of schedule, however, is 8th best, so we do like seeing that. And having Tom Brady in that division certainly helps that as well. Not in that division, I should say. Really, I feel like his 2020 pass volume is safe, and I love Lev Bell, the player, but he's totally wasted in that offense, and Frank Gore's arrival only makes that worse because, that probably spells less rushing attempts, and it probably won't help his efforts to surpass a total of 4 touchdowns from 2019. So, we love to see him on basically any other team but that Jets offense because he's just not the same player that he was.
Yeah, it's man. And you said it, Jay. It's funny you mentioned that he was 27th when it came to his goal line touches. That was probably the most alarming thing for me. So not only were the Jets one of the slowest paced teams, which probably isn't that surprising. Only 3 other teams lost less offensive plays per game than the New York Jets.
Huh.
But they only had as a team 7 goal line attempts, period. And inexplicably, Sam Darnold had 2 of those.
Jeez.
So, poor Lev Bell only got 5 touches around the goal line. And, when it comes to him getting targeted down around that area, only got a couple of those too. So really the opportunity just wasn't there for him. And you talk about Frank Gore's there now. I know that they've made improvements to the offensive line. They brought in wide receivers. We'll get to that more when we talk about Sam Darnold. But, man, it just makes it really hard to want to put any draft equity into Lev Bell heading into 2020. It really does.
You're both absolutely right. I mean, it just goes to show you how frustrating Adam Gase is when it comes to the usage of Lev Bell. I don't think, according to playerprofiler.com, Lev was 4th in snap share last year, like Jay said. I don't necessarily think that's going to be as high this year. And if when he's 4th in snap share, he's only 27th in goal line touches. What's it going to be when his snap share is even smaller? What's it going to be when he's got Frank Gore to use at the goal line? So, I mean, his only hope is that passing volume. And honestly, for Lev Bell to be of value this year, he's really going to have to slide in drafts because it's a bunch of guys going around him that, unfortunately, due to their situation and not necessarily their talent, are in much better situations than he is.
Yeah.
So,
Real quick, I mean, I would hope that Sam Darnold, hopefully being back for a full slate of games this season, would make a little bit of a difference. I don't mind the price tag, but again, overall, too many question marks to stake too much with on your team.
Free Lev Bell. Come on, that would be just a great trade before the season started. Moving on in this division, we have Buffalo Bills running back Devin Singletary currently going as the RB23 at the 405 behind Chris Carson and Jonathan Taylor and in front of David Montgomery and Mark Ingram. His projection is currently RB22. His total foresight rank is RB27. And I got to be honest, at this point right now, at that price point, I think I have to pass because I want a little bit more upside than what I think he provides. He was RB26 in full PPR formats and fantasy points per game in 2019. He did miss 3 games. He had 151 rush attempts for 775 yards. He had a very efficient 5.1 yards per carry average, only had 2 rushing touchdowns. He added 23 receptions on 41 targets for 194 receiving yards at a 6.7 yard per reception average for 2 additional receiving touchdowns. His notable 2019 stat ranks, he was 19th in RB2 percentage. He was 22nd in overall consistency, 25th in consistency, weeks 10 through 16, 26th in foresight consistency. Now, he was, like I said, he was hyper efficient, 12th in yards per attempt. He was 6th in 20-plus yard rushes and 14th in receiving touchdowns. Notable next-gen stats, I found it very surprising that he was absolutely dead last in facing 8-plus defensive fronts. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but it just popped out to me as being something super surprising. Notable player profiler stats, he was 3rd in both breakaway run rate and juke rate. The Bills overall were 6th in run plays per game. The offensive line is middle of the road, 18th out of 32. The strength of schedule is pretty bad, 29th out of 32. And, you know, the tale of Devin Singletary is as simple as this. His efficiency is outstanding. But problem is, number one, they don't pass a ton in Buffalo, so that limits his RB target upside. Number two, Zach Moss is a beast and will continue to take away touches just like Frank Gore did in 2019. And 3, I don't see his total touchdowns and 4 overall improving whatsoever because Moss and Josh Allen will consume the vast majority of all the goal line carries in Buffalo.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, man. He's somebody that really jumped out. And I have to say, I had no idea last against 8-man fronts. And right. I feel like that kind of explains a lot for me because, you know, I sit there and I look at Frank Gore and, you know, he was absolutely one of the most inefficient goal line runners there was in the NFL last year. But yet Buffalo would just keep going to Frank Gore. But, you know, maybe they knew a little bit better than we did because if Singletary is struggling against 8-man fronts, he's probably not that good of a goal line option, which is why we saw him get 2 total goal line carries. And just for our listeners out there, when I'm referring to a goal line carry, I'm talking about 5 yards and closer to the goal line. If I talk about a goal line target, I push that out a little further to 10 yards and closer to the goal line, just to kind of specify that. But in Singletary, speaking of goal line targets, he only got 2 of those too, and 1 total touchdown with, I guess, 4 total goal line touches. And Ben, you said it perfectly. They brought in Zach Moss, and I think that's for a reason. You think of the kind of runner he is. They need someone who can, you know, punch it in, and they don't want to have to rely on, you know, Josh Allen all the time. That's not what you want to use your quarterback for.
I'm going to disagree with you guys. I like Devin Singletary. I'm a Devin Singletary guy, and, you know, it took him a while to get ingrained in that offense last year. It is very surprising to me that the Bills, that he was dead last in stacked boxes, considering you would think defenses would want to force Josh Allen to throw the ball. So you'd think they'd be coming with pressure all the time, daring them to throw downfield with his inaccuracy issues. So that's very surprising. But, you know, I look at where he finished. I like the statistics about breakaway run rate, juke rate, all those types of things as an actual runner. And really, you know, there have been some comments from the coaching staff about how they want to get him more involved in the passing game. Maybe that'll help Josh Allen out a little bit, getting more into a groove in games with having some shorter routes out of the backfield and maybe a little bit more of a safety net. But with Zach Moss coming in and maybe vulturing some touchdowns, I'm okay with that, you know? Like you said, Ben, we saw that last year. So, to me, Devin Singletary is exactly where he's being drafted right now. He's a nice RB2, and I've got no problem with that. You need that on your team.
I'll listen to you say, if you tell me that you expect his targets to go up fairly significantly from 41, that could, if I believe that, which I don't currently believe that, it might impact my opinion about him. But I think the hyper efficiency, the third and breakaway run rate, the high juke rate, I think part of that is explained away by the metric that he is last in facing 8+ defensive fronts. And who are you taking who are you taking him ahead of in the group that he's being drafted around? Chris Carson, Jonathan Taylor, David Montgomery, Mark Ingram. I want at least 2 of those guys over him.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily disagree with that, but as we're going through his stats right now, he's drawing comparisons in my mind to Austin Eckler and just a hyper efficient player, except there's no Melvin Gordon in front of Devin Singletary. He's got a complementary piece behind him who is a rookie. We don't know how much that team's going to trust a rookie to carry the ball on the goal line or how that's all going to develop. So I'm not going to crush Devin Singletary just because the Bills spent some draft equity on another running back this year. So, we see a lot of two-headed monsters in the NFL nowadays and a lot of teams who can sustain 2 fantasy-relevant backs. So, again, I like Devin Singletary. Second year in the league, I would expect him to improve. He only had 4 touchdowns last year. I don't see much regression there.
Well, I don't see any improvement there either. I mean, hopefully he can get 4 again this year.
You don't see any improvement over 4 scores.
Not with him getting 0 goal line looks pretty much. I mean, he better be able to continuously break away and have big plays in order to get any touchdown upside whatsoever. The biggest thing, I think all his numbers are completely sustainable from last season, and Moss doesn't change them too much, but I feel like people are expecting him to take yet another step forward, and I don't know exactly how he does that unless he gets more goal line volume, unless he gets more pass volume. If either of those things change, then all of a sudden it's a whole new ball game, but I don't know that I see either of those things happening.
I mean, he was RB26 last year, and he's currently being drafted as RB23, so the step is pretty small, I would think. I mean, a back-end RB2. Again, I'm not going to crush a guy. You need that kind of guy in your team.
And I'm not crushing him either. I just think his upside's limited compared to a guy like David Montgomery or Jonathan Taylor that's going right in front of him and right behind him.
All right, fair enough.
It's all relevant.
All right, well, good. We're going to move on to a guy who I know we all agree on, and that is New England Patriots running back Sweet Feet James White. Now, this Patriots offense is going to look a lot different this year. James White is currently going as RB32. Let me say that again. James White is currently being drafted as RB32 in the 7th round in drafts, behind Damian Williams, Darius Geis, and in front of J.K. Dobbins and Ronald Jones. So his current 2020 projection, fellas, is RB31, right in line with his ADP. His 2020 Total Foresight rank is actually RB35. Man, say it isn't so. Yeah. So we take a look at some stats. His fantasy points per game over the last 3 years. He's been RB21, RB10, and RB37. Last year, he only missed 1 game and finished with 65 rushing attempts for 250 yards for a 4-yard per carry average and 1 touchdown on the ground. Where he really did some damage in the fantasy world was he had 69 catches on 92 targets for 612 yards for an 8.9 yards per reception and 4 scores. Still a little bit of a drop-off from what we've seen out of James White, but some notable stats from 2019. He was 5th in RB2 percentage. He was 18th in consistency, 26th in consistency from weeks 10 to 16. We did see a drop-off come the end of the season for James White. He was 25th in foresight consistency, but he was both 6th in receptions and targets at the running back position. He was 3rd in receiving yards and 4th in receiving touchdowns. So a mere 612 receiving yards and 4 scores earned him 3rd and 4th, respectively, at the running back position, when it seems like, really, he didn't get the ball all that much. So let's move on to some notable player stats. He was second overall in yards per touch. That's what we like to see out of James White, and that's why he is sweet feet. His O-line rank this year is 7th out of 32, pretty solid out of New England, and his strength of schedule is 3rd. That's a nice combination right there. So Sony Michel is one of the least efficient running backs in fantasy football, plus he and Rex are both regularly ouchy. We know this. Cam is used to targeting CMC a ton, which bodes well for Sweet Feet, and Cam's rush ability opens up that whole offense. So, buy or sell, Ben?
I'm buying Sweet Feet all day.
That's what I like to hear, my friend. And I think, we talked about it before this podcast. He's going in the 7th round, which, we thought was, wow, surprisingly early. But as RB32, a guy who has been such a dynamic fantasy player year in and year out, the only frustration at times has been his usage. That seems like tremendous value for me, especially when he's going around guys who are oft injured in Darius Geis, who are unproven in J.K. Dobbins, and who have been on as high and low of a roller coaster as you possibly could be in Ronald Jones.
Yeah, I have to admit, guys, as much as I love James White, until doing a little research heading into this podcast, I was pretty low on him this year. And that was even after finding out Cam Newton was signing. I was, still kind of like, well, he has his role. Even if Sony Michel's dinged up, I don't know if we'd see that much of an uptick in, his carries. And I don't know if we'll see that much of an uptick as far as, I know we will probably see a downtick as far as his receptions go. But then, when I was looking at the New England Patriots and how that team was as far as red zone targets were concerned, Julian Edelman last season tied for 3rd in the NFL in red zone targets, which is kind of crazy because I don't envision him as the kind of guy that you target in the red zone.
Scott Fishbowl.
However, James White had 19 targets, just one behind him.
Wow.
So an NFL league leader at the running back position.
Wow.
And he had a higher catch rate than Julian Edelman, scored the same amount of touchdowns. Now, I know that, a lot is changing in New England. But the reason I bring that up as far as his value as a receiver is simply because there is an absolute lack of proven pass catchers right now in New England. I love Julian Edelman. He's still, another year older. We haven't seen it from N'Keal Harry, Mohamed Sanu. We haven't seen it yet in New England, and he's not, a spring chicken either. So it's one of those things where he's there, Sweet Feet. I love seeing. I had no idea he was 2nd in yards per touch. That is awesome. It's like the efficiency is there, and like you said, Ben, Cam, he'll target his running backs if he has a running back worth targeting. So for me, I love where he's going at right now in drafts. There is certainly some value there, and I have to admit, I didn't really see it until literally until this afternoon.
That's awesome, man. And that's the beauty of some of the unbiased research that we get to participate in preparation for these podcasts. And it's amazing when you go in with an open mind, even though you have an opinion one way or another, where you shake out at the end of all of that study and all that processing. So, I mean, when you look at it, it's all relative to price tag, like we always say. He's going as RB32, whereas he's finished each of the last 2 seasons in points per game as RB21 and RB10. You look at all of his notable stat ranks last year, they range from 3rd to 26th, all better than his current price tag. Yeah. And I'm sorry, did they add a running back on that roster? No, they didn't. All they did was bring in Cam Newton, who's going to open up the rushing lanes like crazy in that offense. And like we always said, he's somebody that is very comfortable targeting the running back. And I felt high on James White before you even told me, Steve, that he was one of the leading guys in the NFL at red zone targets with 19. That's just crazy. So I think, spoiler alert when we get to Cam, but I think just the match between Cam's ability, Josh McDaniels' ingenuity, and Bill Belichick's genius, I mean, it could be scary stupid in New England, which would be very annoying.
It would be very annoying, Ben, but you said free Lev Bell, and I'm sitting here thinking free James White. a guy who is second in yards per touch. We see how dynamic and how dangerous and efficient he is every time he gets the ball. And all we do on this podcast is pound the table to say, get the guy the ball. And especially down the stretch last season, you know, they looked for any other option but James White. When Rex got healthy, they brought him back and got him involved, even though he really was non-efficient whatsoever. So, Steve, to your point, I look at the weapons on this offense, and really, if you have to go to a guy as your dynamic playmaker, is that guy going to be Julian Edelman, N'Keal Harry? I mean, you said it. In my mind, James White is clearly the most talented offensive weapon this team has, and yet it just, in the back of my mind, there's this voice saying, yeah, but Bill Belichick doesn't care about that. So in week 10, we're going to be so frustrated with James White usage because they're just going to do what Bill wants to do, and they're going to prove that they can do it however he wants to, and that doesn't mean that James White's going to get fed regularly, and it's going to drive me crazy. That being said, I love James White and his value.
It could, but Jay, I think when you were talking about the entirety of the New England backfield is Sony Michel, James White, Rex Burkhead, and Damian Harris. You can count on a couple of those guys to get injured throughout the year. So, I mean, if they don't want to use James White, they might be forced to. Yeah. And it is the Love Fest continues on Fantasy Foresight, the podcast, with our next running back in this division. Now Miami Dolphins running back Jordan Howard is currently going as RB36 at the 7-10 behind Ronald Jones, Tevin Coleman, and in front of Keyshawn Vaughn and Marlon Mack. His current projection in 2020 is RB40. Total Foresight likes him as RB26. I'm definitely drafting this guy. I am a known Jordan Howard truther. Over the last 3 seasons, he has finished as RB25, RB38, and RB15 in fantasy points per game. That is in full PPR formats. He did miss 7 games due to injury last year. He had 119 attempts for 525 yards at a 4.4 yard per carry average. He added in just 9 games last year with that offensive line 6 touchdowns. He only had 10 receptions on 14 targets for 69 yards and another touchdown through the air. Notable stat ranks, he was 26th in running back 1 percentage and 27th in overall consistency. I say those are notable because I compare that to the RB36 price tag. A couple of things now are really fun about Jordan Howard when it comes to the next gen stats and the player profiler stats. He was 8th in running back efficiency, according to next gen stats. He was 8th in breakaway run rate. Jordan Howard, that's right. 8th in breakaway run rate, 18th in juke rate. He's got a little wiggle too. And he had 6 goal line carries in 9 games, which was 23rd in all of 2019. Those 6 goal line carries was 23rd in all of 2019. He did that in just 9 games. Who's going to take the goal line carries from him in Miami? The answer is nobody. So he's going to have a whole lot more than 6 goal line carries this year. Now, Pro Football Focus does rank their offensive line dead last in the league. I think a lot of that is looking at last year. They did a lot to address that offensive line in the offseason. Yeah. They have a middle-of-the-road running back strength of schedule. And check this out. Did you know in full PPR formats, in weeks 1 through 9 last year, he was running back 16? 16. It's been a while since Howard has had such a clearly defined role heading into a season. I like him for at least 1,100 rush yards and at least 7 touchdowns. Lock it up.
Wow.
And I had no idea that he ranked 8th in running back efficiency. And I doubt a lot of people listening did either. In the juke rate, I mean, because you think of Jordan Howard and you just kind of think like, oh, he's not, fluid catching the ball in the backfield. Exactly. That's a perfect word for him, Jay, plotting. And, man, talk about the love fest continuing a little bit. So, Miami, they should have a lot better defense this year. They improved their line greatly in the offseason as well. I want to tell you guys, last season, they, as a team, had 16 goal line attempts. And to put that in perspective, the Baltimore Ravens had 23, which led the NFL. So not a far cry from that. Now, this is a team that was utilizing Ryan Fitzpatrick, Patrick Laird, Kalen Ballage, some marquee running backs, one that wasn't a running back, down around the goal line. Obviously, that's going to be Jordan Howard's role. It's not going to be Matt Breida. We'll talk about that here shortly. So those touches are going to go to Jordan Howard. And I just want to throw at you, over the last 3 years, Jordan Howard's had 25 goal line attempts. He's punched in 15 of them, 60% conversion rate. When it comes to goal line rushing, guys, he's had 84 attempts the last 3 seasons. 23 of those he's punched in for touchdowns, 28%. To put that in perspective, when you have guys hitting 25% or higher, I mean, that's elite. We're talking about your Ezekiel Elliott's, your Christian McCaffrey's. So, he's in that category. And the reason I bring that up is he's done it in Chicago. He's done it in Philadelphia. Why not Miami? And the workload is going to be there. So how often can you get a guy in the late 7th round that, offers? I understand he's not a target guy. We're talking PPR, but he definitely offers upside at that cost. So, all right, guys, I'm done on Jordan Howard for now.
Well, listen, obviously, this podcast, we are all Jordan Howard guys. We are defenders, if you will, truthers, if you will, what have you, because he's a guy who's quietly gone about his business no matter where he is, what role he's in, and just produced on the field, in real football, and in fantasy. And the disrespect that he gets is just appalling. RB36 for a guy who, like you said, is elite in goal line carries, who has finished RB25 and RB15 2 of the last 3 seasons, and one of those was a season in which he was traded. And now, Ben, my only question mark for Jordan Howard entering this season, you say he's got a clearly defined role. I hope that's the case. They did also bring in Matt Breida. I understand that he's often injured, and that Jordan Howard is not. The guy, rarely misses time. So, obviously, I'm going to stake my claim on the Jordan Howard train in that backfield. I just hope that he does get the bulk of carries and is the lead back in that offense for the duration of the season.
I mean, Matt Breida he's an explosive playmaker. He's a specialist type of guy. He's not a handle the workload type of guy. He's definitely not a goal line type of guy. And while Jordan Howard is not going to provide you with any real pass catching upside, his touchdown, his goal line upside, and his goal line efficiency that Steve walked you through is immense. And I think his value, even though Matt Breida is going later, I think Jordan Howard is by far the better value of the two in this backfield in 2020.
Well, and guys, sorry, I just have to interject really quick. What is interesting about Howard in Miami is when you do look at some of the target share of Miami running backs, even last season, around the goal or in the red zone around the goal line, it's disgustingly more than it ever should have been, given the options they had. And when you think about it, well, who do they have right now? Matt Breida is not a PPR monster. That's not his MO as a pass catcher. Certainly isn't Jordan Howard's either, but there is a chance that Fitzpatrick will check down and throw to running backs regardless of who they are. So whether he doesn't have a high catch rate or not, I have a feeling Jordan Howard could surprise a little bit as far as just from a volume standpoint. It might not be a sexy yards per catch, but hey, he might get some, a little more PPR love this season than we're expecting.
Well, and it honestly, looking at everything and seeing how surprising he is in efficiency, juke rate, breakaway speed, all that kind of stuff, you gotta love seeing those things. And really, the Miami Dolphins were one of the surprise teams last year, reeling off 5 wins when they had no business, as the management was trying to dismantle that team as much as possible and rebuild for the future. So they could surprise yet again, and if they're going to, then it's going to be Jordan Howard. They're going to have to get production out of the running back spots. So between the two, I'd obviously bet on Jordan Howard. So speaking of that, who I maybe wouldn't bet on is the other New England Patriots running back, and that is Sony Michel, who is currently being drafted as RB39 in the middle of the 8th round, which honestly, guys, surprises me. But that's just maybe my perception of what I believe others feel about him. Right now, he's going behind Keyshawn Vaughn. He's going behind Marlon Mack, but he's going in front of Alexander Madison and Tariq Cohen. So his current projection right now is RB 42. We have 2 New England running backs so far projected as RB 31 and RB 42. I mean, think about that for a second. The lack of weapons, like somebody's got to score fantasy points on that team, and the best we're going to do is RB 31. All right. His Sony Michel's 2020 Foresight projection is RB 31. So a little bit better than that RB 42 projection. But honestly, I got to pass on him because look at the last 3 seasons. He's finished as RB 41 and RB 32 as the lead ball carrier for the New England Patriots, a team that is always in the Super Bowl hunt. So, a guy who's getting the bulk of the carries, the number 1 option, and his best finish is RB 32. And it got worse last year. So, he did play all 15 games last year. He had 229 attempts, 838 yards for a 3.7 yards per carry average and 6 touchdowns. Now, if in PPR land, maybe there was some icing on that cake, he had 12 catches on 20 targets for 94 yards and 0 touchdowns. To put that in perspective, we just talked about how Jordan Howard doesn't catch the ball much. He had 2 less catches on 6 less targets for similar yardage. Like, it's just crazy. All right.
So that's 15 games compared to 9.
Right. So, yeah, just not there in the PPR format for Sony Michel. Some notable 2020 stat ranks. All right, he was 2019 stat ranks. He was 13th in rushing attempts, 16th in rushing yards, and 14th in rushing touchdowns. So not bad. He was 7th in 8+ defensive fronts. He was 14th in goal line carries with 8 goal line carries, which may surprise. As I had mentioned previously, the Patriots' offensive line currently ranks 7th out of 32 teams, and their rushing their strength of schedule for the running back position is 3rd best. If Sony stays healthy, he has hope because his awful 3.7 yards per carry could certainly go up with defenses having to account for Cam's legs on every play. But his health is a question mark, given he has had another offseason surgery on his foot. Plus, Cam is known to vulture goal line carries from his running backs. Still one more Pats running back to discuss on this podcast as well. And we talked about how much we love James White. So, maybe that price tag is appropriate for Sony Michel this season.
Yeah, Jay, it's funny you mentioned those notable stats, and they're all solid. I mean, you're talking like a higher end RB2, but at what cost as far as being highly inefficient. The volume certainly helped him like big time. I look at Sony Michel; he was 7th in the NFL with 41 red zone carries, and the reason I bring that up is because you said it. Cam Newton, more than likely, I have to think, will be the starting quarterback. And he is somebody who, throughout his career, was wildly more effective with red zone carries and definitely over Sony Michel around the goal line. Cam Newton's somebody who clocks in closer to 75-80% of his goal line touches are going to end up in the end zone. I mean, that's why he is the vulture of the goal line carries. So when I look at Sony Michel and I think about him moving, what he can be next year, you have injury concerns. I think his volume is going to go down, and those valuable red zone and goal line touches, they will also go down because Cam Newton's there. So to me, yeah, I think I'm completely like all out on taking him because I don't even want to start him on my team, honestly.
Which is just crazy to think about, considering where we were when he was coming in as a rookie. All the expectation and hype.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the stat ranks from last year, you show that he was completely volume dependent to be just RB 41 in points per game. So, I mean, can we count on the volume? I don't know. He just had foot surgery and he has a injury history. So can we count on the efficiency to go up if he's there? Probably because of Cam, but can we count on 6 rushing touchdowns or more? Probably not, because Cam's probably going to take some of the goal line work from him. So, and again, unless he starts catching a lot more passes, unless he becomes a lot more efficient, and unless he is durable for all 15 games again next season, I don't see him improving much on a performance where, like Steve said, you're not even trying to flex that guy, So you've got people. Alexander Mattison has league-winning upside if Dalvin Cook goes down, and he's a flex-worthy option from time to time based on his targets. Tariq Cohen is a high value going after him. Always a PPR stud. Marlon Mack, Keyshawn Vaughn going ahead of him. That's a different conversation. But the point is, at that point in your draft, running back 39, you want upside. And what kind of upside are you projecting for Sony Michel in 2020? I just don't see it.
I was gonna say Keyshawn Vaughn at least has some upside as well, because we don't know what to make out of him in that backfield. So at least there's some potential there.
Yeah, you're taking a leap with Keyshawn for sure, but like you said, there's a potential where he gets the bulk of the carries in what we expect to be an exceptionally good offense.
Exactly.
I think we can all agree that we're out on Sony in 2020 unless something drastically changes. Moving on to the next running back in this division, you've got the Miami Dolphins running back, Matt Breida, who they brought in. Man, through the first 4 rounds of the NFL draft this year, I was just going nuts to Jay how Jordan Howard is the winner of the draft. It's crazy. And then I believe they traded a 5th rounder all of a sudden for Breida. And I was like, well, I still like him, but the upside's not as crazy anymore. So Breida is currently going as RB42 at the 812, behind the guys we just talked about, Alexander Mattison, Tariq Cohen, in front of Phillip Lindsay and Latavius Murray. His projection is RB35 in 2020. Disclaimer here, Total Foresight, and we're still working we got a couple of things we're working on behind the scenes to fully ratchet up all of our numbers. So I think this is going to change in a very short time, but currently I do have to disclose that Matt Breida is ranked as RB17 according to Total Foresight. There's not too many times where we're the crown jewel of our website and I fight personally, but this is one of those times. And I am passing on Matt Breida even at the RB42 spot, because I think Latavius Murray has just as much league-winning upside as Alexander Mattison if anything happens to Dalvin Cook or Alvin Kamara, and Tariq Cohen, rock-solid guy. I'm taking 3 out of the 4 guys going around him in drafts, and it's not even close. In points per game, we're not accounting for for missed time or for shared backfields and overall volume. We're just talking about points per game efficiency. In the last 3 years, Matt Breida has been RB46 in points per game, RB30 in points per game, RB67 in points per game. Remember, when we were talking about Jordan Howard, it was RB25, RB38, and RB15 in the exact same metric, okay? He missed 5 games due to injury last year, had 119 attempts for 607 yards at a 5.1 yard per carry average with that awesome San Francisco 49ers offensive line. Had 1 rushing touchdown, added 19 receptions on 21 targets for 120 yards for a 6.3 yards per reception average and another receiving touchdown. He was 12th in yards per carry, 4th in longest rush, 18th in 20-plus rush yards, and 21st in receiving touchdowns. That all spells to me he's a big play type of guy. He's not going to be a big volume type of guy. He was 11th in 8+ defensive fronts faced last season, and he was 1st in fastest play in 2019. It's not the first time he's been on that list either. He had a 22.3 mile per hour run on an 83-yard rush touchdown. He was also 6th in breakaway run rate. Remember, Jordan Howard was only 8th, and he was 30th in juke rate versus Jordan Howard's 18th in juke rate. As we mentioned, they have a last-ranked offensive line according to Pro Football Focus, and they have a middle-of-the-road 15th running back strength of schedule. I do not dislike Matt Breida, the player. He is an explosive, hyper-efficient, speedy specialist type of guy, but he is just not built to carry the bulk of the rushing carries, and Howard is taking all the goal line work, like I said. In best ball, sure. Let me roll the dice on a Matt Breida. In redraft, no thanks.
Right there with you, Benny. We've seen it. Matt Breida, he struggles to stay healthy without having a monstrous workload. And, going to the Miami Dolphins offense, and despite, their attempts to help rebuild that line, it is not the same line that they have in San Francisco. It's not going to be the same Kyle Shanahan running scheme that you can pretty much just like plug and play running backs and have a great fantasy output, which what makes having those 49ers running backs like so enticing. So, yeah, he's explosive. If he can, I'm sure at some point throughout the season, he'll break a couple of long runs for Miami. Do you want to risk even flexing him every week to get those plays? I highly doubt it. For me, I'm just completely out on Breida. I look at how the 49ers used him last season around the goal line. It was non-existent. He had one goal line carry, period. Twice did he get targeted inside the 10-yard line. It's just not his game. But like you said, he can run 22.3 miles per hour. He's got Tyreek Hill speed. So they'll find ways to get him the ball in open space. But, I just don't get it where he's even going in drafts. And oh, by the way, they gave up a 5th rounder. That should also kind of say how Miami, views him and what they think of him as far as, how much of a focal point he's actually going to be.
I mean, you guys know me. I'm somebody who wants to know that I can count on a player during crunch time, and that's just not Matt Breida, unfortunately. Even though it does sound like we're hating on him a little bit, but it's just reality. I need to know that you can stay healthy, that you're going to get volume that can translate into fantasy scoring. And like you guys have said, I know it may not be interesting when we all agree on a guy, but I think we kind of have him pegged, and Ben said it best. He's a best ball player. Fantastic best ball player. All right? Mm-hmm. That's exactly what you need and what you want to be successful. But on season-long fantasy, there are just better options. So
yeah, and I'll say this, Jay.
Yeah.
Real quick before you move on, I'm sorry to interrupt. From a strictly a best ball perspective, when you compare him to Alexander Madison, Tariq Cohen, Phillip Lindsay, and Latavius Murray, I'm not sure that I take any of those guys over Matt Breida when you're looking at him from a best ball standpoint.
Sure.
But just from
great point.
Right, but from season-long redraft is a whole different story.
Exactly. All right, so I'll be interested to hear your guys' take now because we've already disagreed about this player, or at least this backfield, a little bit so far. So next up we have Zach Moss, rookie running back for the Buffalo Bills coming off a 10-6 season. Zach Moss is currently being drafted as RB46 at the end of the 9th round, almost the 10th round, behind Latavius Murray, Kerryon Johnson. Did you know he's still alive, guys? Kerryon, still playing football. And then in front of Antonio Gibson and Chase Edmonds. So right now his 2020 projection has him pegged at RB49. We do not have him ranked quite yet in Total Foresight. The Bills' offensive line rank is 18th out of 32, so middle of the road. Their strength of schedule for the running back position, not great, 29th out of 32 teams. Over the last 3 seasons in college, Zach Moss rushed for nearly 3,700 yards. He had 37 rushing touchdowns and had a 5.87 yards per carry average. He'll be touchdown dependent for sure and risk Josh Allen vulturing him at the goal line. He and Devin Singletary really limit each other's upside, especially in PPR formats, but if anything happens to Singletary, Moss all of a sudden becomes extremely interesting. That I can certainly agree with, Ben.
So, guys, it's funny that tonight, and I thought this when we were getting on for this podcast, I was like, I'm so happy that not only are we going to talk about the Buffalo Bills, but it's quarterbacks and running backs tonight, because the dynamic between, you had Frank Gore, I know he's gone, but there was that role. Then you have Singletary, but then you got the Josh Allen factor. And that's what is so interesting to me when we talk about Zach Moss, is that Frank Gore, so in our league of record, I had times where I had to stream Josh Allen. I had times where I had to stream Frank Gore. Let me tell you, Frank Gore, highly inefficient. Josh Allen, it was almost like, okay, Frank Gore couldn't punch it in a couple times. Josh Allen, quarterback sneak, touchdown. By the way, Josh Allen, 5 for 5 in goal line attempts as far as touchdown conversion goes. But the point being, they certainly really tried to use Frank Gore before it came to that, probably because, again, you don't want to use your franchise quarterback, like we saw Patrick Mahomes, quarterback sneaking, unless you really have to do so. So I do think there's definitely going to be some kind of defined role that they utilize Zach Moss. And we talked about Singletary already and kind of his lack of usage and upside and how he struggled against an 8-man box as far as his goal line touches are concerned. So Moss is someone who definitely is interesting to me. And the way I look at it, I think it might be more of Moss taking away some of Josh Allen's rushing touchdown upside than the other way around. So it's just going to be I think Bills will be a great team this year. They're going to be fun to watch.
Because he's coming up in a couple of spots, I debated whether or not I was going to make that exact same point, Steve. But since you brought it up, Josh Allen had 9 rushing touchdowns last season. I definitely expect that to go down a little bit. And I think the only person on that offense who stands to benefit from that really is Zach Moss. And if Zach Moss all of a sudden is trending in the right direction and getting all the goal line work, it's all relative to price tag. I view him similarly as, somewhere in between like a Latavius and an Antonio Gibson, where Antonio Gibson, you could see a path to him taking over that backfield entirely. Latavius is a little different where he has that standalone flex value because of the offense that he's in. But if something happens to Kamara, he's all of a sudden like a top 5 running back option. So, Zach Moss has a little bit of both, where he could be that new rookie that finds his way to take over that backfield. Conversely, if also Singletary goes down, something happens to him, he now owns that entire backfield if he's competent whatsoever. And I've seen a lot of pretty savage comparisons to the size of Mr. Moss and Mr. Singletary. I was just looking on Twitter about how somebody was messing around saying, yeah, they become really good friends, and Zach Moss lets him sit on his lap all the time. I was just like, whoa, that's pretty harsh against Devin Singletary. So it'll be interesting to see how this all shakes out. But again, I think at the RB46 at the back of the ninth, his upside's there, and I feel a whole lot better taking Zach Moss shares at the 912 than I do about taking Devin Singletary shares at the 405.
Can't disagree too much with that. I mean, there is definitely some upside there and some safety and some tremendous value there later. Obviously, 5 rounds later, almost 6 rounds later. So, yeah, I like it.
Yeah, and the reason that we went running back then quarterback on this podcast is because we did not want to end with New England Patriots running back Damian Harris because it's a little bit of a snooze fest. Because he's going as RB59 at the 13-10. He had 4 total carries in 2019. He's going behind guys like A.J. Dillon, Darrington Evans, and going in front of Carlos Hyde. And I actually like Carlos Hyde out of all those guys in that group because I think Carlos Hyde is pretty well guaranteed to be the week 1 starter. And if he plays well, they could just slowly bring Chris Carson back, and they expect Rashad Penny on the PUP list. So I know we're not talking about Carlos Hyde right now, but man, out of those 4, that's who I'm going with, not Damian Harris. But I don't mind him at his price tag. I would not be targeting him, but I don't mind if you're going to take a shot on Damian Harris taking over that backfield, because they do have that good offensive line, 7th out of 32. They do have that good strength of schedule, 3rd out of 32. And I mean, he was a 3rd rounder in 2018. He needs an injury to become relevant. But again, he, just like we said for James White, he's playing behind Sony Michel and Rex Burkhead. So, that injury probability is there. So, we never know. We can see.
Yeah, just like you said, Ben, this is somebody I personally am not targeting, but I get it for people that do. I mean, we're talking about you got to have a couple guys on your bench that you're willing to cut the first couple of weeks. And it's like, hey, take your shot, see what happens. You never know. We talked about it. There's plenty of opportunity in that offense. So I get it. Not my thing, but I get it.
All right, but what can I add to that? Let's move on to something more interesting. Let's get to the quarterbacks. Woohoo! Yes. All right. You mean to kick it off?
Yes, sir.
All right. First up, we have my guy. I can't even say it with a straight face. Buffalo Bills quarterback Josh Allen, currently being drafted as QB 11 in the 9th round, going behind TB 12, Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers. Man, Aaron Rodgers. Just think, guys, how high he was going in drafts, and now look. and he's going in front of Carson Wentz and Matt Stafford. His 2020 projection, get this, Josh Allen's 2020 projection is QB6 overall. Now, maybe I was going to save this stat, but maybe I should throw this out right now. Just before we were getting on, I saw our guy Andrew Erickson, a competitor in the Fantasy Foresight Challenge last year, tweet out, Josh Allen has yet in his career to throw for 300 yards in an NFL game. Okay, QB6 overall, though.
I'm not surprised.
Okay, nor am I, Steve. His 2020 Total Foresight ranked QB 23. I gotta say, I like that a lot better. He'll probably end up somewhere in between. QB6 seems pretty rich for me. I personally would pass on him, but let's dive into the numbers and see really how it boils out. His fantasy points per game finishes from 2017 to 2019. He finished QB 9 last season and QB 29th the season before that. Okay, so for his 2019 season overview, he played in all 15 games during the fantasy season. He had 268 completions on 456 pass attempts. In case you can't do math really fast in your head, that is 58% completion percentage. That's a little below where you want to be if you're keeping score at home. He did get over the 3,000 yard mark by a whopping 84 yards for wow, look at, guys, he averaged 6.8 yards per attempt. My goodness, he was just slinging it downfield. He did have 20 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. Am I reading Andy Dalton's stats? Okay, he did have 109.
I was going to say, this is where he's very different from
Andy Dalton.
This is
where he's very different. All right. He did have 109 rushing attempts for 510 rushing yards. A far cry from Mr. Lamar Jackson, but still very impressive for the quarterback position, where he really stepped to the forefront in fantasy scoring at the quarterback position, especially on the rushing side, was that he had 9 rushing touchdowns. Take that to the bank. All right, some notable 2019 stats. He was 6th in points. He was 9th in fantasy points per game. He is making me eat all of my mocking jokes right now as I'm reading these stats. He was 11th in consistency. He was 8th in consistency from weeks 10 to 16. All right, I feel like I should apologize at this point. He was 12th in foresight consistency. This is a lot of top 12 stats I'm reading off here. He was 10th in QB1 percentage. For quarterbacks, he was 2nd in rushing attempts. He was 3rd in rushing yards, and he was number 1 in rushing touchdowns, as you may have guessed. Okay, some notable next-gen stats for 2019. He was 5th in intended average air yards.
So he was throwing it downfield a little bit, Jay.
I was wrong. You were right. I am dumb. You are smart. Sorry,
I know the notes that are coming, and I hear everything you're saying. I'm like, this is going to be fun.
All right, this one's back in my column. He was 26th in passer rating, so take that. Now, some of the concerns, and these are legit concerns. He had 2 concussions, one in week 4 and one in week 13. His offensive line is ranked 18th, as we have mentioned before. Now, his quarterback strength of schedule is 29th out of 32 teams. Not great. Was his fantasy finish, largely, I'm going to say that again. I'm going to get this out this time, only do it much smoother, all right? How about that? Was his fantasy finish largely supported by 9 rushing touchdowns? Yes. But if you took away more than half, 5 of those rushing touchdowns, he would have still finished as QB 13 in points per game versus QB 9. Really not a far cry if you take away some of that rushing touchdown production. And if you take away all of them, he'd still have been QB 21. Not too long ago, Josh Allen's ADP was like QB6. However, at QB 11 right now in drafts, while he's not a target of mine, I don't hate the price either. Obviously, Ben wrote that, and I read it, and it's fantastic, and I'm sure he agrees with everything I just said. God, I know we have to take emotion out of this, Steve. I just have a hard time getting on the Josh Allen bandwagon. Please,
I'm coming to support you here, brother.
All right, yes!
So, we talked about, the Buffalo Bills, what they've done in the red zone and around the goal line rushing the football, and that we should expect his rushing touchdowns realistically probably to be cut in half. Yeah. But then, guys, just looking at Josh Allen as a red zone passer, and which I haven't mentioned it this entire time. For anyone listening, you can go to fantasyforesite.com, the Foresight Encyclopedia tab. I do have many of these statistics for red zone, goal line, passing, teams' tendencies for play calling, running versus passing, all that kind of stuff broken down and where those ranks are. And, when I look at the Buffalo Bills, they were 26th in passing as far as the rate in which they dial up those plays. I don't find that's going to change a whole lot. They have guys that run the football. They have a good defense. That's the formula that's going to win for them. So I don't see passing volume changing. And then when I look at the kind of quarterback he is in the red zone, there are only two quarterbacks with a worse completion percentage than Josh Allen. And that speaks to the inaccuracy. So, there's a lot of people that are like, well, he loves throwing the ball deep. Now they have Stephon Diggs, and I see that fifth in intended air yards. Well, if it is the turf that's catching a majority of those passes, it just doesn't matter. So, and we're talking again, it's a COVID off season. I don't know how well Stephon Diggs is just going to step in and all of a sudden, improve Josh Allen. And it's interesting to me because I've heard a lot of people say how happy they are to get Josh Allen where they are in drafts because they see, just a wild ceiling for him. And, and I'm just thinking I actually think he's probably going to be worse off than he was last year because I don't think he's getting those 9 touchdowns.
All right, Ben, before you go on the Josh Allen defense, let me just say, Steve shouldn't have to plug his own work. We are both fired. If you are listening to this podcast on Sportscaster,
I already mentioned it. Maybe you weren't paying attention.
I probably wasn't. YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. First of all, it is July 15th, and you are listening to an AFC season preview for running backs and quarterbacks, and we love you for it. That's what you should be watching right now to escape reality. Thank you for watching, but if you are a visual learner and you're tired of seeing our mugs, go to fantasyforesight.com and go to the Foresight Encyclopedia tab. Steve's work is concise. It is detailed. There is so much information packed into it. He's got tables and graphs. There's colors. I mean, it is great to read through. It's a lot of actually very pertinent information to fantasy football that you won't find a lot of other places. So it's great content. Now, like Steve said, Josh Allen's intended air yards. I have a lot of great intentions, Ben. They don't all pan out.
Ladies and gentlemen, peek behind the curtain. Jay just said everything he just said so he could think of good intentions line. But let me clarify about Josh Allen. I am with you both. At QB 11 with TB12 and A-Rod going in front of him and Carson Wentz and Matt Stafford going behind him, I am 1,000% taking 2 of those guys over him. I'm probably taking 3, and I'm maybe taking 4, all 4 over him. So I'm not Mr. Josh Allen by any means. But when you go through all of the top 12 2019 QB stat ranks, it gets your attention a little bit. Now, I will say that fantasy points per game, consistency weeks 10 through 16, and Foresight consistency and QB1 percentage are all largely supported by those 9 rushing touchdowns. So I agree with Steve. Big time rushing touchdown regression is coming. But if people are expecting him to take a step with his with his downfield accuracy, knowing that he's 5th in intended average air yards. If he can improve his accuracy a little bit, all of a sudden those big plays can be there. But I don't necessarily know if he's going to have as good of a touchdown interception ratio as he even had last year, 20 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. So it'll be interesting to see. The bottom line is it's all relative to price tag, and there is zero doubt in my mind that I would rather take Carson Wentz and Matt Stafford over Josh Allen in 2020 all day, and it's not even close.
Apparently, it took Josh Allen for me to think of a way to articulate my feeling on mobile quarterbacks or guys who are largely dependent on their feet in the fantasy world, and it's this. You look at these guys, and it's not that I dislike any of them. They're very exciting players, but they may be elusive and be able to avoid the shots, but at some point, as you get older, you do slow a bit. So like Lamar Jackson's very exciting, and he is able to escape and prevent himself from being hit, but at some point during his career, he's not going to be so quick and so shifty. So at some point you do have to rely on your arm and throw from the pocket to be successful in the NFL. You might be able to ride this fad, the first couple years you're in the league, but take a look at Cam Newton. You start getting some wear and tear on that body, and all of a sudden you've got ankle issues, you've got shoulder issues, you've got these things. And Josh Allen had 2 concussions last year. And to Steve's point when we were talking about some other players, is that a guy who you're going to want to rush out there and put in harm's way time and time again? Your franchise quarterback. So as these guys get older, and you find that, hey, maybe we shouldn't subject our franchise quarterback to that kind of punishment because we need him on the field, they need to be able to be productive from inside the pocket, and I just have a hard time seeing that right now out of Josh Allen because the accuracy issues. The intentions are great, Ben, like we said, but he needs to be accurate passing the ball inside the pocket. He won't be able to rely on his feet all the time, and maybe that's why they brought in Zach Moss, because they know they can't count on him to lead the charge in the ground game. They need some other body there to help out so he can stay healthy after suffering those 2 concussions last year.
Yeah, I think the Josh Allen hype is a little bit skewed by the 9 touchdowns, the 9 rushing touchdowns, because it's going to really drastically affect all his numbers. 2, he did take a very significant step from from year 1 to year 2. So I think people are thinking, okay, now you add Stephon Diggs and he's going from year 2 to year 3. That's probably where it's coming from. And like I said, I get it. There's some people where you draft at a certain point and I'm like, man, you might have just lost yourself your league. I don't necessarily know that Josh Allen, for all I know, he's going to continue to rush. Like you said, Jay, it's older guys with the rushing problems that you really have to worry about. This is only his 3rd year in the league. So he's still got a long ways to go. But, the 2 concussions are something to watch. If he gets another concussion before week 13, all of a sudden that's 3 concussions in 1 calendar year. So it's, it's not a good thing by any means. So, I like I said, there are times where I'm like, no way, I'm all out on a guy. I don't understand the logic. It makes no sense to me. I'm just saying that Josh Allen is no longer in that category for me. I get it. I disagree, but I now at least get it. So moving on to somebody that I don't know if I should be as excited about as I am, but I'm not going to apologize for it. It's New England Patriots, brand new MVP quarterback, Cam Newton. He is currently going yet even farther down drafts as the QB 14 at the 10:08, behind Carson Wentz, behind Matt Stafford, in front of guys like Daniel Jones and injured Big Ben. His current projection in 2020 is QB 15. We don't yet have him listed in Total Foresight. We will rectify that very soon. At the QB 14 spot, I am drafting Cam Newton all day. I do like Carson Wentz and Matt Stafford more than him. I do. But if those guys are gone because they're going ahead of him, he is the next best guy that I do like on that list. Obviously, he was injured in week 2 last year, so his fantasy points per game in 2019 was awful. Prior to that, QB 9 in fantasy points per game. QB 5 in fantasy points per game. Don't forget, Cam Newton is elite. He's a former Super Bowl quarterback. He's a former MVP quarterback. He's got a good offensive line, 7th out of 32. He's got, an okay middle of the road, 20th, 21st strength of schedule at the quarterback position. But you know what? you look at what he was able to do without the likes of Josh Daniels and Bill Belichick in 2017 and 2018, and even several years of success prior to that. Now that he's teaming up with Belichick at QB 14, sign me up all day. Let's go.
Steve.
Oh, Steve, you're on mute, brother.
I was just making sure you guys had your head on a swivel. So, so good job. So yeah, when this first went down, guys, I kind of was on the side of, okay, well, so what? But I have more and more kind of been coming around to, you know what? If Cam is healthy, given the opportunity to work with Belichick and McDaniels, what his skill set is, what he can bring to the offense, because mainly there's a lack of weapons there. It's like Cam, to me, like, is the weapon, and he will open up whatever weapons there are on this offense. I'm a little more, I've come around to being like, yeah, if he's healthy and plays this year, he will definitely be a fantasy asset. And where he's going right now in drafts is definitely attractive. And like I alluded to a little earlier, you go back and you look at what Cam did as a goal line rusher the last several years, highly efficient, vultures touchdowns, but also in the even in the red zone, guys, he's up in that right around 25-26% of his carries. He's going to convert those to touchdowns. And like I said, that's kind of like an elite number that you look at. So there's definitely a lot to like. The opportunity is going to be there. Sure, they're not going to throw as much, but they will run the ball more, and Cam will get his as far as that goes.
Ben, I'm a little surprised and impressed, frankly, that you're willing to be so high on Cam, because 2 years ago on this podcast, coming into the stretch run of the season, we were all in on Cam as a bye quarterback for the playoffs because he had the most advantageous schedule. We were all in, and he broke your heart. And here you are, just a short time later, all in again. And I love it. We always say you got to take emotion out of it, and it's tough to do.
Number one, players get hurt. They do. And there's a lot of talk about how his injuries were managed and how soon he came back from injuries and things of that nature. Number two, good quarterbacks have a short memory. And number three, I just think that it's a whole different ball game when you add him to Belichick. It just is. And it's all relative to price tag. When's the last time that Cam Newton has ever been designated as fully healthy coming into a season and been ADP QB 14?
Right. No, you're right. Okay. One, he's going as QB 14. We are studying 12-team PPR redraft leagues. So that means somebody's either taken two quarterbacks before you've taken one, or you're taking them as a second quarterback in round 10. Something just isn't right there. But anyways, regardless of that, I do like the fact, like Steve said, assuming he is healthy, and we don't know right now if he's going to be ready come the start of the season. And that's a big risk that you're taking in the 10th round. When you're trying to still build your team, that's a last starter in a lot of leagues. So you are still taking some risk there that he is going to be healthy. But assuming he is healthy, I do like the fit in New England. Obviously, like you said, Ben, great coaching staff and all that. He'll be in good hands. But really, honestly, what I like, and I'm really not trying to make a joke here, but with his shoulder injury, with his downfield accuracy issues historically, they really don't have anybody on that team who can get downfield, so it's going to be a lot of short and intermediate routes, which is honestly where he excels. So he's probably on a team with a player makeup that suits his ability at this point in his career. I'm really not trying to make fun of the guy, because I don't know what he can do with the long ball right now, honestly.
I can't remember off the top of my head if Cam ever had an exceptionally good offensive line or one that was ranked 7th heading into a season. That helps. Right. Number two, I will say the lone year that he was with a notable offensive mind in North Turner, he was an excellent passer that season.
Yeah.
So with a combo of Josh McDaniels and Bill Belichick, I'm confident that that coaching duo can get the absolute best out of Cam. And he was injured in week 2, not week 14, 15, the playoffs or anything like that. So I just think that I'll be honest, I'm buying into a little bit of his video hype about they ain't seen this Cam before. I believe him. I don't think we have seen the Cam before that we're about to see when he gets on the field teamed up with Josh McDaniels and Bill Belichick. I cannot wait to see it.
All right, moving on, we have New York Jets quarterback Sam Darnold. Right now, he's going undrafted according to Fantasy Calculator in 12-team PPR redraft leagues. His 2020 projection, however, has him listed as QB 27. Total Foresight has him projected as QB 25. I like that. His fantasy finishes the last 2 seasons, he finished in as QB 34 and QB 24. Last season, we saw him in 12 games. He had 250 completions on 405 attempts for a rate of 61.7%. He didn't quite get to the 3,000 yard mark in 12 games, just shy of that at 2,800 passing yards. He had 18 touchdowns, 12 picks. He did have 30 rushes for 64 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. Some notable stats: he was 26th in yards per attempt. That's not really a notable stat, but we had to put something in that box, right, Ben?
That is a notable stat because it's bad.
Well, okay.
And I'm trying to make a point.
Okay.
Bad.
Well, okay. Pair that 26th in yards per attempt with the fact that he had the 3rd most time to throw of quarterbacks. Youch. He was also 29th in quarterback rating. So not good notable stats there. He was 2nd in receiver yard separation too. Oh my God.
Man, I didn't know these. This is going to be
bad.
Yeah,
honestly,
wait.
Man.
I'm going in on Sam Darnold in just a minute.
I came into this
first.
I came into this podcast somewhat high on Sam Darnold because I remember seeing some stats that when he came back from injury finishing the season, his accuracy was so.
No.
Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I read the wrong stats. I am glad we are going through this. Okay, so the Jets' offensive line ranks 27th out of 32 teams. Good God. Lord help you, Sam. So then his strength of schedule for the quarterback position is also 26th out of 32 teams. That doesn't get any better. There's nothing good here. 57.7 accuracy his rookie year, 61.7 accuracy last year, low accuracy, low yards per attempt. Adam Gase as his coach. I'm staying away unless you're in a deep 2-quarterback league. And honestly, Ben, I cannot argue with that sentiment now that I've seen all of this.
So Ben, before you go off on your thing, and I'm pretty much focused just kind of on some of the red zone numbers because they're kind of putrid too. So Sam Darnold last season only completed 50% of his balls in the red zone. Then put that in perspective, I just talked about Josh Allen being only 2 other guys being worse than him, 48%. So Sam Darnold, bottom dweller in that category. Even though he only had the 25th highest in attempts in the red zone, so very low volume because let's face it, the Jets don't really get in the red zone all that often, still managed to lead the NFL in interceptions in the red zone. All of this just points towards somebody who, I don't know, maybe he was just seeing ghosts, as he said last season. I don't know, but he certainly struggled. Now, to be fair, their line was terrible. He did not have a lot of weapons. Chris Herndon was on the shelf with injury suspension the entire season, and probably the single biggest factor in Sam Darnold's demise in 2019, Adam Gase. All right, Ben, your turn.
Well, he mentioned the comment that he's seeing ghosts. Maybe he's seeing the same thing that Adam Gase sees when he's doing press conferences. But it all comes down to this. I was shocked to hear, because I heard all about Mekhi Becton and what they're trying to do to improve the offensive line for the Jets. Sam Darnold did what he did last year, having the third most time to throw at the quarterback position. And he had the second best receiver yard separation in the NFL. And yet he was 29th in QB rating and 26th in yards per attempt. And like we said, he's got the Adam Gase plague. So I don't see it. Now, granted, he's going undrafted. He's a totally free dart throw. If you're somebody that believed in him, liked him coming out of college or whatever, and you think, you are somebody that likes that rookie Sims, you are somebody that likes Brashad Perryman, I can understand it because it's free. I'm never going to hate on you if you're going to throw your hat in the ring for a penny stock, because you can cut them after 1 week, 2 weeks, whatever, and it's no big deal. But I can make such a better argument for you in even the free category. And it starts with our very next quarterback on this list. And that's Miami Dolphins quarterback, not Tua Tagovailoa, but Ryan Fitzmagic, baby. Ryan Fitzpatrick, also going undrafted. He is currently projected as the QB 33. Total Foresight likes this man as QB 19. I am drafting this guy all day. He's my QB 3 in Scott Fishbowl, and I'm thrilled about it. Points per game the last 3 years: QB 20, QB 6, and QB 30. He played 14 games last year because of the Josh Rosen experiment. And, he had 283 completions on 461 attempts. Only good for 61% accuracy, 3,200 yards, 7 yards per attempt, 19 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. He added 228 yards on the ground and 3 more rushing touchdowns. Now, here's the thing. When I tell you these stats and I tell you that he finishes QB 20 in points per game last year, you wouldn't expect all of the numbers that I'm about to tell you as far as his 2019 notable stat ranks. And consistency from weeks 10 to 16 last year, after he really got rolling in that offense and they really moved away from Rosen, he was 4th in consistency down the stretch from weeks 10 to 16. He was 7th in Foresight consistency, 8th in top 6 percentage, 12th in QB1 percentage, 10th in rushing attempts at the quarterback position, 10th in rush yards, and 4th in rush touchdowns. He was 5th in completed air yards, and he did all this on the 3rd worst time to throw, unlike what you saw Sam Darnold do with the 3rd best time to throw. And as far as his player profile, he was 14th in red zone attempts and 12th in deep ball attempts. Now, Pro Football Focus does rank their offensive line last, but like we said, they did a lot to upgrade that O-line, and quite frankly, down the stretch, it didn't even matter for Ryan Fitzpatrick. The strength of schedule is pretty rough as well, 28th out of 32. But again, I think that's all baked into his absolutely free price tag. And Fitzmagic had a solid fantasy season down the stretch, including all those QB1 stat ranks, despite having just a terrible offensive line situation, having just the 3rd worst time to throw. Miami did a lot to address that O-line in the offseason. So if that improves at all on the offensive line front, it could put him in line to make a whole lot more magic in 2020. And that's honestly what I'm betting on. I think Brian Flores has this team believing. You saw it down the stretch. You saw it in week 17 when they went into Foxborough and took Bill Belichick and Tom Brady to task when they needed a win to get into the playoffs. And all they did is improve this offseason. Man, I think the Miami Dolphins are a sneaky, sneaky good team in 2020.
Yeah, man. I mean, when I was looking through a lot of the red zone numbers for quarterbacks around the NFL, and I saw that right there, Ryan Fitzpatrick had the same completion percentage as Tom Brady in the red zone last season, coincidentally, divisional foes last year. Had 3 more touchdown passes than Tom Terrific, and about 50% less attempts in the red zone. Ryan Fitzpatrick was 9th with 16 touchdowns in the red zone last year versus just 1 interception. And like you said, that was with the Josh Rosen experience being mixed in there. He didn't start 3 games and played, partial amounts of other games. So there's definitely a lot to like about Fitz heading into this season. While I do think they will pass a lot less in Miami, just being in a better offense with a better defense can help get Ryan Fitzpatrick down in the red zone a little more often. And there's certainly some weapons there. I don't know, guys. There's a lot to like when you talk about, hey, price is everything, right, Benny? So what was he? Did you say quarterback 33? Oh,
that's his projection. He's completely undrafted. Yeah,
he's free. So there's no reason that he shouldn't be owned in a 2-quarterback league. And if you like playing the streaming game, why not? So I just wouldn't be surprised if he has a lot better season than, people are counting on.
All right. Before I start yelling, I'm going to read this stat. Per Kevin Cole, who you can find on Twitter at Kevin Cole PFF, who's with Pro Football Focus, he tweeted out some interesting information. Over the last 50 years in the NFL, pro football, there have been a total of 9 quarterbacks who have had a breakout in their third season who struggled with efficiency and accuracy in their first 2 years. 9 quarterbacks in 50 years. That class this year would be Sam Darnold and Josh Allen. The biggest correlation to breaking out in your third year is accuracy, and these are 2 guys who have struggled with accuracy. That being said, I'm sitting here looking at the stats, getting a little bit upset that we crapped on my guy Sam Darnold when he had a completion percentage of 61.7% and Fitzmagic was 61.4%. Wait, they both had a 7-yard per attempt average. Wait. Ryan Fitzpatrick had one more touchdown and one more pick.
One team barely threw the ball. The other was like second in the NFL in pass plays.
Yeah, and one had the third most time to throw, and one had the third least time to throw.
Listen, what I'm saying is, what it all comes down to, maybe what the difference is between these 2 guys more than anything, is their head coach.
No, it's the fact that you're lucky. I don't have it right in front of me. I'm going to find out exactly where Sam Darnold ranked in consistency from weeks 10 to 16 because it wasn't anything good enough for me to put on this prep sheet.
Okay,
and Ryan Fitzpatrick was 4th in the NFL, 4th in consistency from weeks 10 to 16. Then how bad was his
consistency prior to that?
Oh, not worse than Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold was QB 14 in that same time. Versus
the same stats.
No, Jay, you're wrong. It's QB 4 in weeks 10 to 16 for Fitzmagic, QB 14 for Sam Darnold in that same stretch when everybody was like, oh my God, Sam Darnold's coming on. Yeah, QB 14 in consistency. That was great.
I love you guys.
So fun. Jay just thought there was way too much disagreeing, so he decided to be ridiculous
Ryan
and get me
Fitzpatrick.
I see your bait, and I'm taking it anyway.
Ryan Fitzpatrick is really just an older Sam Darnold. That's what I'm going to call him from now on.
That's trash. I want to see again. You're making now. I never in a million years thought I was going to have to compare Ryan Fitzpatrick to Sam Darnold. 5th in completed air yards. Sam Darnold has to be like last in completed air yards.
Now,
that man is averse to throwing it downfield.
I do like 5th in completed air yards versus Josh Allen's 5th in intended air yards.
I'll tell you what, there's only 2 quarterbacks worth anything to me in this division this year, and it's Cam and Fitzpatrick. And with Cam's health concerns, I might feel a little bit better about Ryan Fitzmagic to start the 2020 season.
I'm glad we ended this episode the way we did. It was a good call starting with running backs and finishing with quarterbacks. Well, I'm revved up and ready to go. I was tired when we started. I'm ready. Let's just go right into the next one.
Well, we'll see how you feel on Saturday morning when me and you are back, without Steve, unfortunately, to discuss the next group in the AFC East. So, Steve is going to be on with us every single Wednesday to always be involved in the quarterback, running back conversation. And then Jay and I will tackle the wide receivers and tight ends ourselves on Saturday morning, starting this Saturday in just a couple days. So, either one of you knuckleheads got anything else before we get out of here tonight?
I just want to say looking towards next week, when we do talk about the NFC East, there's like 10,000 fantasy relevant players in that division. Yeah. So
next time we have you on, we're going to have an exciting bunch. That's for sure.
Put some coffee on, Steve.
Beautiful. All right. Well, me and Jay will be back with everybody on Saturday morning to preview the wide receivers and the tight ends of the AFC East. Can't wait.
And that wraps up this episode of Fantasy Foresight, the podcast. We thank you for joining us. Be sure to visit us, as always, at fantasyforesight.com. Use the links at the bottom of the page to find us across social media, including Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and wherever you pod. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and we'll see you next time.
The Jets won 7 games. How did that happen? Sam
Jay is lying. Jay doesn't like Sam Darnold. He's lying.